not really feeling cool with coming asking me questions, don't worry, I'm not going to be upset by that. I don't know when they're going to start up, but study table is something you can look into. That's done with Sister Susan Kill, and she actually speaks class, so she knows everything I do, and she can help you to really get what it is you need to do in order to do well. So just throwing that out there. Do what? And you still do archery, Yeah, sure. That was just to get some information out. But the way it goes is archery practices Monday, Wednesday, Friday after school at 2. You have to show up for 2 of those. Otherwise, it's not really practical. But otherwise, yeah, totally. First practices today. Yeah. Oh, that's right. You guys haven't finished Japan yet. That reminds me. The archery team practices in the gym from 3 to 4 o'clock after school. Could someone remind me where we got with Japan?
Europeans were seen as a threat, Christians as
That.
Okay.
Yeah. So how was the Christian religion how did that destabilize the traditional Japanese system? Can somebody explain that to me? I don't know. How did Christianity destabilize the Japanese government? Okay. Who was the emperor of Japan? Some guy? Could you be a little more specific? Well, who was he in terms of traditional culture? God. So wouldn't Christianity kind of destabilize that a little bit? If you believe your emperor is God, or at very least, secured with the mandate of heaven, and if you don't believe in that particular faith, doesn't that mean you don't believe in the emperor? What's to say you're going to rebel against him? So that's kind of the idea. It's seen as a threat. So Christianity is oppressed and persecuted to such a degree that no one's allowed to practice the faith, and indeed, no European is allowed in Japan, punishable by death. So, that's what happens. And by the way, it wasn't the Christian mindset to try to do that. There wasn't some insidious Christian plot to overthrow the government, although certainly there were those in the Japanese government that believed that was the intention. But that was simply not the truth. The Jesuit missionaries, St. Francis Xavier, didn't intend to do any of that. He was trying to spread the faith. So just an FYI, that's going to be part of propaganda that's going to be utilized against Western civilization coming up. But that is Francis Xavier, whom St. X is named after, just an FYI. And that shows his missions. And you'll notice it's not just Japan, he had all over Southeast Asia, as well as parts of Africa. Yeah? How much? What word did you get? All right. Right, I'll give you like 10 seconds. Yes. Yeah, I was curious how many people got that. Yep. My daughter loves that song. The only part she knows, though, are Got Me Grapes and Bump, Bump, Bump the very next day.
Oh, that's all.
All right, moving on. So isolationism is a policy where a country removes itself from interaction with other countries. The United States had this policy leading up into World War II, but the atomic bomb the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki kind of created words out of my mouth that aren't true. The bombing of Pearl Harbor was what established that. Of course, Hiroshima and Nagasaki was America's retaliation at the end of the war. But anyways, so European trade was restricted to Nagasaki. They didn't fully go into isolationism, but they did not allow Christianity, and they certainly didn't allow anyone to enter or leave. So this meant that they basically pulled themselves up and kept from developing in a non-traditional way, which is going to lead to problems down the line. However, they do remain slightly more open than other countries which became fully isolationist. Now you have to understand, this is an attitude, this is a philosophy, and it's alive and well in the world. You may hear people talking about the United States and saying how we should not be in other countries, we shouldn't be sticking our business in other countries' problems, yada, yada, yada. That is generally an isolationist viewpoint. So, just an FYI, I'm talking history here, but it's by no means dead. It's a concept that is still around. Understand? Yeah. Fabulous. So, anywho, the only folks that were allowed in Nagasaki, though, interestingly enough, were the Chinese and the Dutch. You might ask, why the Dutch? Well, because generally most of the other European forces had ulterior motives. The Dutch, they just wanted trade. That's all they wanted. That's all they cared about. In particular, trade for Chinese products and to some extent Japanese products that would sell very well in Europe. For instance, there is a product that we are still not really obsessed with, but it's still a very common part of our culture, especially when people get married, that originates from China. You see, it is customary for a newly married couple to be given a set of fine porcelain dishes for the use of entertaining important people, so they have a nice fancy dinnerware set. We call that China. We literally call it from the country it originated in. Porcelain is a type of ceramic that's basically a glass. And it originated in China and was sought after because of the beautiful, what's the word I'm looking for here? Glazes, I guess that's where I can come up with the designs that could be put into it that were just amazing. So it's kind of a cool thing. Anyway. All right, moving on. Conquest of the Americas. This will be Chapter 4, Section 1. So any all of you,
How was your weekend?
it was fantastic, thanks for asking. The Conquest of the Americas is not, from my understanding, the chapter name. That's what I'm calling it. But what we're looking at is how the Americas came under the control of the Europeans. Now, we're going to ask a couple of important questions here. The first of which is, how did the Europeans successfully conquer the native empires they came across? Because weapons and armor are not a satisfactory response. You know, yes, they had more advanced weapons, but frankly, they weren't exactly modern weapons either. I mean, they're using muskets. So these weapons, which take, at fast as 20 seconds to fire, if you've got a line of guys doing that, they're going to be overrun in no time. Hernando Cortez had something like 300 guys at his command, and he was able to take out an empire of hundreds of thousands. So the question is how? How was he able to do that? So we're going to see how that answer is as we go. So to start off, I'm going to give you some words that you guys need to know. The first is conquistador. Because whenever Columbus ran into the Americas, he was an explorer. He wasn't really seeking to go and take areas over and settle and create colonies. He was looking for a way to China. However, he does recommend the area for conquest. Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. And by definition, no, not really. I'm giving you an explanation of what those terms are. It's your job to extrapolate a definition from that. That'll look it up in your book. So the term conquistador refers to a, what you know the word means? Conqueror. It's a very specific title. This is a new kind of adventure sent to take over an area. Okay? So this might beg the question, why? Why would someone be willing to fight and possibly die to take over an area? I'll tell you why. Confess. That is a gold doubloon, also called a piece of eight, Spanish gold coin. They're worth, in today's money, about $10,000, more or less. Except that that's not really gold. That's worth about, $4 museum replicas. Because, I don't have $10,000 to go throw in my no doubloons. But it does show you an idea of what it looks like. It's an exact replica. And the thing we have to understand is that these are gold. This is money. Money was literally made from this. And where is it at, by the way? You'll see on there it's got a cross across it. That's actually the Pillars of Hercules. It's part of the royal arms of Spain. In the day's money, it was about $24. But the thing is, the average laborer made something like, I think it was something like 50 cents a week, something like that. So we're talking quite a bit of money there. Actually, no, that's wrong. It was 50 cents for a gentleman, essentially, an officer, somebody in the military. Your average laborer made like something like 10 cents. So we're talking a lot of money for one disposal. Ships would carry those in the ship's purse in case you had a catastrophic thing happen to the ship and you had to repair it on the fly. So like people carrying on credit cards in case they have a problem with their car on the road trip. That was a lot of money. It's a relatively small thing. So when Columbus first sees gold, he sends us back to Spain and the conquerors show up. Because conquistadors got paid with money that they captured and could make quite the living. Furthermore, they sent out to spread religion, to convert the heathen natives to Christianity. In fact, their sails were painted with red crosses, sort of like a new neo-crusade. So it's often said that the conquistadors were coming for gold and for God, the double G's. That was their mission. And it's understandable why they would do that. But they were soldiers. They were explorers. They were this special type of thing. But again, they were fairly limited in the resources they had. And one of the biggest contributors, the best weapon they had at their disposal, wasn't even a weapon they intended to carry with them. It was disease. Things like smallpox. Whole other thing. Smallpox is a devastating disease. It's similar in that it has pox, it creates these little boils, but it's far worse than that. You can look it up on Wikipedia, and actually you can even see the effects on YouTube if you were really wanting to see that. She's saying it goes forward. But the reason why the Europeans didn't have as much a problem with it has to do with immunization. You see, nowadays we go through a process of immunizations and what's the word I'm looking for here? Shots. You know what I'm talking about? Vaccinations, thank you. In order to deal with the disease. The Europeans didn't have that technology, though. Instead, they relied upon a natural immunity that they've got from livestock. Their livestock were the original carriers of this disease, and so they were around it so much they developed natural immunity. Well, the Native Americans didn't have that, and so they died by the thousands. In fact, we have almost a mass extinction of Mesoamerican peoples because of the disease. So that, as much as anything, is one of the prime problems with what was going on. I'm going to talk about alliances and word in a second, but there is another word I'd like to add here, and hopefully this works. It's not going to work because I don't have the thing. Let's see here. Well, oh, it's showing up on mine. Weird. Herb. Let's try. Does that work? Or maybe, let's do this. Yes, do that. All right, that might do it. Work? I think it will. All right, so I'm going to switch back to another form so that it gets bigger again. I'm just doing this so folks at home can see it. I'm adding another word here, which is, oh gosh. There we go. Is Ecomiendas. Ecomiendas. This word right here. You got glasses on it? Ah. E-C-O-M as in puppy. I-E-N as in no. D-A-S. Ecomiendas. I'll get to that here in a second. Right, let's go back to the other system so that we can actually see these. Then, okay, there we go. Oh, that's actually working now. What's with that? Weird. Huh. Curious.
Mr. Bud, how do I get the book on my iPad? I have little things where you give me a code, but I'm not going to.
I need to see that, and basically it's going to take a few minutes. You got to actually like come into school early and go over with me.
Can I get it to you tomorrow, like before class starts?
Yeah, sure. All right, there we go. That'll be interesting looking. But yeah, and we just basically what's got to do is I got to get you set up in the system, and then you go to the site and do it.
I'll just bring it tomorrow before class.
That's good. All right. So initially, what? That was working for the past 2 periods, though. Yeah. What? I can't hear you. You gotta talk about it. It's another section. We're going on the next section. I know, I said I'll be anything later. Right. So the first group encountered by Columbus are the Taino. The initial response is pretty good. It's a pretty good relationship. However, pretty quickly, the Taino are going to be conquered and indeed enslaved in order to mine gold. You see, mining is a really kind of terrible job. It is very labor intensive, it is very dangerous, and it is also very, very not healthy, we'll put it that way. Everything underneath the ground. And so, to get gold, basically the Taino were enslaved to mine. And for a long time, it was thought that they were worked and with the influx of diseases, basically worked to death so that they ceased to exist as an ethnic group. Lately, it's been discovered that some did survive and are still around today, but for the most part, it was a devastating situation. And one of the things we're going to see is the first group of people to experience slavery in the European New World are Native Americans. Once, however, they start to die off and the need for labor continues on, the Europeans turn to other places to supply cheap labor. And of course, where do they get their cheap labor from? Anybody? Yeah. What? Yeah. The transatlantic slave trade, yeah, from Africa. So this is the beginning of slavery in the United States. And we tend to think that we talk about slavery in America, we probably think of like the U.S., like the American South. But the truth is a vast majority of slaves, at least initially, were going to South America and Central America. That's why culturally it's such a blend of these different cultures. So this is the beginning. It's this need for labor, first in mining, and then as it shifts over to the production of sugarcane, that we're going to see the invention of the transatlantic slave trade. Now, another thing to consider as we look at diseases and things like that is that the Europeans themselves are likewise going to encounter some diseases. And the question is, how is this possible? Would disease occur everywhere? Why wouldn't everyone have the same diseases? And it has to do with climate. It has to do with temperature. Diseases, sometimes I think we forget, are living things. They have preferences just like humans do. And so the types of diseases we find in different places has a lot to do with the climate. And so you have tropical diseases like yellow fever, which the Europeans are encountering, and then they're also bringing smallpox and things like that. However, the Europeans do not genuinely have the same problems. And we're actually going to watch a video series probably next week called Guns, Germs, and Steel. It has to do with this question of European advantage. Why did Europe, why were the Europeans the ones who spread all across the world and conquered all these places? Why not somewhere else? It has to do with those three equations. So, but ignore where it says 86. That actually has to do with the page number in the old textbook. You have the same graph. I'm just not sure what page it's on. So let's talk to Hernán Cortez. Now you'll notice I actually have his name spelled differently in two different places. Both are correct. Either or, whichever you prefer to do. I've seen it both ways. He had 600 men at his disposal. And whenever he landed in what we think of as Central America, he came across several indigenous groups that he was able to communicate with. And indeed, he got the help of a young lady by the name of Malinche. Malinche acted as an interpreter for Cortez and was informing him about a great capital city of the dominant tribe known as the Mexica. M-E-X-I-C-A. The Mexica. Does that sound familiar at all? M-E-X-I-C-A? It's a bit like Mexico. Right. And we get the term Mexico from the Mexica, the Aztec. And so he goes that direction. Now here's where things get interesting. Why would Malinche, a Native American, help Cortez against the Aztec? Because she was an Aztec. In fact, the Aztec were just one of many tribes in a greater empire. They just happened to be the ruling tribe. And her thinking was this: if the Spaniards are able to weaken the Aztec, then that means that her own people could possibly seek revolution and indeed freedom. So this was very much an enemy of my enemy is my friend. And as we're going to see, that's going to be a problem when it comes to the natives defending themselves against the Aztec. Because instead of forming an alliance, they are fighting each other. In fact, Many of these tribes will often side with the Europeans against their own countrymen, for lack of a better word, although that's a gross underestimation, and will instead find themselves in pretty bad situations. And that, again, is something we have to understand. You know, these Africans and these South Americans don't think of themselves as Africans or South Americans. They think of themselves by tribe or by nation. So to think that, well, why do they band together? Why would they? They're enemies in a lot of cases. They want the other side to fail and to be defeated. The problem, though, is when they do this, they lack the strength to stand against the Europeans before it's too late. So that's going to be an important concept. So what happens is Malinche leads Cortez to the Aztec capital in Tenochtitlan. And as he's going around, you know, obviously the Aztec aren't blind. They hear there's this guy coming, but they actually, this is where things get a little weird, because there's a prophecy in the Aztec religion about a pale-faced foreigner who was the embodiment of the chief god, Quetzalcoatl, who was going to come back to life, essentially, and usher in this new age. And it was the fact that he was a pale-faced foreigner, because, again, he was very pale compared to the others by the Aztec standards. But most importantly, it was said that this pale-faced foreigner, Quetzalcoatl, would be riding upon the beast of another world. What could that possibly be?
Horse.
Exactly. He had this white, majestic-looking horse. And remember, horses were not in the New World before the Europeans brought them here. They didn't exist here. So it's kind of like, that's a very weird-looking alpaca. You know, that's the closest looking thing. It's just this weird. I mean, if you think about it, horses are weird-looking things. This big, fat body on little, tiny little stilt-like legs and a giant face. You know, they're pretty odd-looking when you really try to describe. It's like describing a giraffe to somebody. It's like, well, I like giraffes. Don't get me wrong. I've pet a giraffe before. It's awesome. You can do it at the zoo. They're a lot softer than you think. But, you know, they have sticky tongues and stuff. And it's just like, it's this big thing with a long, spotty neck, and it's got horns, you know. It's kind of like the oddest looking thing in the world. It is. You know? So, but this beast of another world is what let him get close to Tenochtitlan. Now, contrary to what historians like to say, they didn't like, you're our God, let us worship you. They were more kind of like curious, like, what's going on here? Because he doesn't speak Aztec. How can he be God and be like, what do you say? Because I would think God would know the language to which he's God over, you know. So they knew something was up, but it was more kind of like, let's see what's going on. So they let him in the capital, and then that was it. Because once he's in there, the disease starts spreading, and he can just raise all kinds of havoc. Like he fights his way out of the capital, and they can't stop him. So this is the Aztec capital, and you can also see the empire emanating from around it, which is now what we think of as Mexico. Now this is a drawing showing the meeting of Montezuma, who is this guy. He was that. I can't. Nope. There it is. This guy. And Cortez, who's this guy in the chair, and that's Malinche. Contrary to, she's not wearing a cape. That's not like a soul patch. That's not like a beard. She was not a bearded lady. But rather, it's tattoo. Tattooing was common in many different native groups in the Americas. Anyway, so this is the supposed meeting of the two. You notice that these guys are arranged sort of like Aztec warriors. They were not carrying these weapons. They didn't have a ladle, and they didn't have spears and everything else like that. They were carrying guns. But this was a native portrayal, so to speak, of how they would have seen it. This map shows what the capital of Tenochtitlan would have looked like. It was a floating city. How cool is that? They actually used kind of an old equivalent to hydroponic farming. They would get soil, it's alluvial soil, from the ocean or the lake bottom. They'd dry it up in baskets and plant their crops on the rafts. And this is basically what it is. It's a bunch of rafts with islands spotted here and there with temples and things like that. Now, Cortez ended up sacking the city, burning it to the ground. Then he dammed up the river so the lake disappeared until it was firm, hard soil. Then he built a new city on top of this. That city is still standing. Care to guess what the name of the city is? No, Mexico City, the capital. This is supposedly portraying the founding of the Nacional. It is a statue in the center of Mexico City. So the Aztec ideology is still part of their culture. Pretty cool. So, South America, the conquistador's name is Francisco Pizarro. When he gets to the capital of the Inca, which is called Cusco, nobody? No, I was waiting for the hey, Cusco, you know? Emperor's New Groove, you know? Cusco, the Emperor. Every time they say his name at the beginning, it's Cusco. Hail, Cusco, you know? This is the thing. With me? Solid? Fantastic. There actually was a Cusco. He did, actually several, but he did not become a llama, unfortunately. He did found a city. Speaking of, did you guys hear about that that one water ride that's like, you get in it, it's like a little, like a tube, and then the lifeguard presses a button and it drops you down, like the floor opens out from under you. You just drop.
Have you done it?
No, but I heard a story about that was hilarious. So apparently, like, people do that and they kind of freak out, and you know, like the lifeguard will look at him and goes like, goodbye, and like has all these kind of one-liners they use to drop and things like that. Well, apparently this one little girl who's like maybe 8 or 9 comes running up and jumps in the thing and goes, "Hold the lever, crunk!" Not that lever! And the thing is he might say, no 8-year-old would think of that. I totally believe it, because some of the stuff my daughter comes up with, she's only 3, I'm just like, what? So, you know, but hey. Well, anyhow, so they go to the capital, and what happened is Atahualpa, who was the emperor, had just got done fighting a civil war. So a war with his brother over the throne. So the whole state was weakened. So because of that, Pizarro was able to capture Atahualpa and then ransom him back to his own people. Now, ransoming is the glorious tradition where you basically threaten to kill someone unless their family or loved ones pay you money. Well, he does that, and he demands, quote-unquote, a big room filled with gold. Now, I don't know, would you guys consider this room big? I don't know, kind of, maybe, I don't know. But consider this room big or small or whatever size you think, filled from floor to ceiling with gold. That's a ton of money, isn't it? So even if this is a small room, it's still a lot of money, right? Well, then they killed him anyways and then burned his city to the ground. So, nice guys, right? You know? And this is where we get to the whole question of how do they rationalize this? You know, because it wasn't just a matter of, well, they're different, so we're allowed to kill them and do whatever we want to them. Because let's be honest, if Cortez sent a letter back to Spain, hey, found these people, they're pretty cool, I'm going to rape and torture and murder everybody. Thumbs up? Are you insane? No! That's not okay, dude! But instead, those of you who read the letter, what does he say? There are these poor savages. They're killing each other. We should step in and help them. We're saving them from themselves. And if we kill them, well, at least their soul will go to heaven. How altruistic! What a nice guy! I'll put a knife in you, but you know, it's okay. You're all right, you go there. You're killing me, I'm saving you. Yeah. This is the rationalization that we see going on. The same thing applies to human sacrifice. Now understand, the Aztec religion, which we're going to talk about here in a second, absolutely had human sacrifice. They killed children. But it was in extreme circumstances. And we're going to get to that a little bit more here in a second. But consider this. The Aztec did not see human sacrifice the way we do. They don't see it as murder. They see it as somebody giving something else so that others can live. Because they believe that their gods were angry, fickle things, that if they got upset, they would just, stop the rain from coming and starve everyone to death. It's kind of rude. So in order to deal with that, in order to keep that from happening, they had to find ways to please the gods. So the priests would begin by giving little sacrifices. Usually this was a blood offering on a piece of paper that was burned, and hopefully that would appease them. If not, more blood was needed. So you'd ramp it up until you get to a whole human getting sacrificed. And so the other thing to understand is that the two biggest candidates for sacrifice were non-Aztec, which they didn't see as human beings to begin with, which you might be saying, well, that's a little bit creepy. Keep in mind, we did the same thing. We treated people as property. So it's really no different. The second is Aztec, who volunteered to have it done. Exactly. And it's the same sort of thing. Saying that how many of you guys would be willing to die to be sacrificed to your gods? Probably not many hands going to go up, you know what I'm saying? But if I were to word it this way, how many people would be willing to die so that their family could live? Like take a bullet for a family member. I'm not asking, I'm just saying. That makes more sense. Probably be willing for people not to put their hands up for that. That's how they saw it. It's no different than a soldier who says they're willing to sacrifice their life for their country. So if we put it in that perspective, maybe it makes a little bit more sense. You know what I'm saying? It's not our job to make moralistic judgments as historians, but rather look back at maybe why someone would do that, and that is why. So Cortez sees this and exaggerates how often it happens. I think at one point in his letter he says something like 1,000 people are sacrificed in one night. Dude, could you imagine being them priests? I mean, sacrifice isn't like, you kind of throw them, it's this in-depth affair with prayers, and you got to strap them down the altar, and I'm not going to go into details, it's kind of bloody, so just an FYI, fingers and ears. But it's basically you take a knife and you shove it into their chest, you open a hole, you reach in, you grab their heart, you hold it up and you burn it, and then you spray the blood all over the temple so that it gets everywhere, because blood is life. And, it's kind of a process. So it's not exactly like it's a quick and easy thing. Now, I don't know about you all, but I don't think I can do 1,000 of anything in a 24-hour period. Like, if somebody was like, hey, you got to take 1,000 quarters and flick them into an aluminum can, I doubt I can do that in 24 hours. And I'm not like, the quarter in the can, we're going to do this, and I'll do 30 spins around that. There's no ritual involved. So the odds of it actually happening are minuscule. There's no way anyone has enough time for 1,000 human sacrifices in one day. I mean, where are you going to get your lunch? I have a box lunch, so in between sacrifices you can grab a quick bite of sub? No, that's not happening. So I'm just saying that mathematically it doesn't make sense, much less when you take into consideration that Cortez has a reason to say that it was happening all the time. Again, we're saving them from themselves. Think of the children. Like, he's got this infomercial, and Eyes of an Angel are playing in the background, and please donate today. I hate those commercials. Damn you, Sarah McLachlan. I hate you so much. I don't care. I already have a dog. Get the rescue. Anyway, but this is a painting, or a drawing rather, that shows allegedly the capture of Atahualpa. Now, the reason I say allegedly is because of this. This is clearly a later drawing. This did not happen when it was going on. There's no way. The reason behind that is you have this topless lady over here going, no. And you have this guy over here who's Atahualpa being like, what are you doing? I'm a guy. The thing is, what happened is the 19th century, there was a period of art called Romanticism. They like to paint things in this really overly dramatic way. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've seen horrible, tragic things in like World War II in HD and like in the news and things like that. I have never seen tragedy strike like someone's animal or someone's kid get hit with a mortar or something like that, and they go, oh! That is totally a dramatic thing that never really happens. So that is not real. But this is supposedly what happened. I don't know, like, the heat. I do that all the time. It's what I'm having to tell. Oh no! Busting out the drama there. But the thing is the Aztec faith is actually a polytheistic faith. And again, they believed that their gods were, for the most part, pretty much a-holes. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of early faiths had that sort of attitude that God is angry and you better do something to make him happy or else. So that's kind of an early religion's thing. So is the idea of sacrifice. For instance, if you look at a lot of animist religions, animism being the idea that there are spirits in everything, whenever you hunt an animal and take its life, a ritual must be observed to thank the animal for its sacrifice. You have to die so I can live. That carries over into early sedentary religions, early farming religions, because again, the idea is that one gives up their life for the crops that come. For instance, there's a story in a Native American culture, I don't remember which, but basically as a child was beheaded and their head planted in the ground, and it sprouted from the first grains that were then harvested. And so there's this giving of thanks for one's sacrifice for life. So that's something we see kind of echoed here. However, other aspects of Aztec and Maya culture was that it was actually fairly advanced and egalitarian. Now, it was definitely a class structure, the Aztec being the highest, but other than that, it wasn't like a rigid caste per se. One could not become Aztec. One could still have quite a bit of power and influence in the society. Furthermore, they had a lot of advances in terms of mathematics, astrology, and as well as their own history. We know quite a bit about their earlier history because of their records. Another thing is their calendar is one of the most accurate ever created. In fact, our own calendar is based somewhat loosely off of it. In fact, that's one of the reasons why people were getting really, really excited, because allegedly, in 2012, the world was going to end. And I can tell you guys, probably about half of my students then were convinced the end was nigh. And then it didn't happen. And everything got very awkward. Yes?
That night that it was supposed to happen, we were from touring, but we were in my basement and we were sitting down, we were watching 2012.
That movie?
And then right at, I think it was a certain time, we just started screaming, and we were like that, and then nothing happened, and we started freaking out.
Nice.
I think I was asleep.
Anyways, but the fundamental problem with that is a fundamental misunderstanding of the Aztec calendar, by the way, because this is what it looks like. Now, to kind of explain this to you, out of the face. Days, months, years, cycles. So basically, as you start and come around, oh my goodness, it's going to end, and we begin again, because it's a circle. Wow. That's where the misunderstanding came from. It's going to end, and it starts over again. It's like, you guys do know how a circle works, that there's no beginning, no end. Apparently not. But you know what, hey, it wouldn't be a fun time unless someone was predicting the future. Guys, have a wonderful day. Until tomorrow.
Anyone?